to Cheyenne Reads. I'm starting this year off with doing my 2020 favorites. I think I have about 6 books. I tried to narrow it down to 5 because I just simply don't have 10 favorite books. I believe I read almost 45 to maybe 48 books in the last year. I wasn't counting, but I did start reading later in the year, so I set my goal for 2021 to 60 books. Let me know down in the comments what's your 2021 goal. Anyways, I'm going to start off with the physical books. One of the physical books that I have that were my favorite of 2020 was Luster by Raven Leilani. I really enjoyed this book. I remember reading it in one sitting and feeling this weird atmospheric vibe that came from it. I really enjoyed reading about Edie. I felt like she's a woman who was very in touch with the sexual side of things of her life, and she was just, I found her in all these sexual encounters in the book, and I'm not really sure why she wanted to be in all of these encounters, but I feel like it made her up as a person, and we followed her journey in this relationship with an older man who was still married and had to adopt a child, and we watched her become this role model for the child, if you can even call it that. Honestly, I wouldn't have added this to my list of favorites, but I really enjoyed the way it made me feel while reading it. It was just such a weird vibe that I got from it that I just can't even put a name to it, honestly. But I would definitely read this again. It was really short, and I would recommend it to anyone who loves books. And it kind of honestly reminded me of a similar vibe to Queenie, which I read this year but wasn't one of my favorites. So I guess I'll save that for last. The next book that was honestly, I was shocked when I read this, No Exit by Taylor Adams. I really enjoyed this. I read this in 2 sittings, and it was such a crazy whirlwind of events. It's about this girl who's on her way to see her mom who's dying from cancer. She's just leaving college, and a blizzard comes, and she pulls over to a rest stop, and chaos ensues. She notices a little girl in the backseat of someone's car in a cage. She's like, oh my gosh, someone inside of this rest stop has kidnapped this little girl. And we find out who the kidnapper is from the beginning of the book, you know what I mean? But there's so many twists and turns, and this book is just so gory. So I would really check the trigger warnings before getting into this book. But it was so good, and it was definitely a 5-star read, and I just love this book. I bought this book at the beginning of 2020, and I didn't get to read it until December, so it was crazy that it was so good, and I've been putting it off for this long. The next series probably won't be a surprise to some of you, but honestly it's the Ember and the Ashes series. I only have the first 2 books, but I love this series so much. I think A Torch Against the Night was my favorite, or maybe even the last book of Sky Beyond the Storm. I can't decide. But the series was so freaking good. The covers are phenomenal. So basically it's about Laya and Elias. I almost said Elia, their ship name. But it's about Laya and Elias. Elias is this girl who, her family was killed and her brother was taken captive by the Empire, and she goes on this quest to get him back by joining the resistance. And Elias, I keep almost saying Elias, and Elias is what are they called? I don't even know what they're called anymore because of stuff that happens later in the book. But he's a part of this army that's very gruesome, and he's a mask. That's what they're called. He's a mask, and he's been trained up in this academy, Blackcliff, and they come across each other, and chaos ensues. There's so much sadness, there's so much pain in this series, there's a lot of heartbreak, and there's a lot of love in this series. But overall, I really enjoyed the series. I found comfort in Laya, I found comfort in Elias. I began to Helene towards the end of the series, and honestly it was just so crazy. The twists and turns really got me. I was literally in tears in two of the books. I just can't describe how much I love this series. It was just so good. But yeah, this series definitely is one of the top. This is basically like almost at the top of the list for me in the series. I mean, in the series of my favorite books of 2020. So the next book, you probably won't be surprised, but it's The Poppy War by R. King. I only have the first book, but the whole series has made it to my favorites of 2020 simply because I haven't been this hyped about a book in I don't know how long. Like since I was like 12, I haven't been this obsessed with the series, like constantly thinking about it as I'm reading it. When I'm not reading it, I'm thinking about it. When I was at work, I was thinking about it. On my commute home, I was thinking about it, and it was just such a crazy read. But anyways, this book takes place, I believe it takes place, and it's about Ren, who aced the Keiju, this test to join like an empire and an army. She wanted to fight for her country, and chaos ensues. There's a lot of war trauma. There's a lot of trigger warnings for this book. I've talked about this book so much, so I don't really know what much to say about this book besides just read it. If you can get through like violence, sexual assault, it's pretty serious because the book highlights events that really did happen in history, and it was just so good. I love the characters. I got an arc for the Burning God. I do have a vlog for that, so if you want to hear my thoughts about the conclusion of this series, check the vlog out. I'll put it in the description. But basically, Ren is just my comfort character. She wakes up and chooses chaos. Really, she really does. But I just found comfort in her. I love how fierce she was. I love how I've never read a character like her before in my life, and I still haven't after reading this series earlier this year. It was just so good, and I don't know if I could do a reread. Like it'd be too emotional, but maybe I will do a reread in 2021 this year. Another book that honestly is probably like my number one like favorite book of the year in this category at least is The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna. I read this book and I devoured it. It was so good. It's about this family who moved to Alaska. The father was in the Vietnam War. The mother is dealing with the father and trying to take care of him after he came back. And it seems like he has PTSD. The daughter, Lenny, starts off with the book as she's like 13, but by the end of the book, she's way older. There was like a lot of triggering things could be triggering to some people, but it was like a really sad book. Like I can't say like I was happy the entire time around reading this book, but I grew a love for all of the characters, especially for Lenny. I enjoyed following her story. I enjoyed watching her get through difficult and tough situations. Like it was just, I don't know, I was at the edge of my seat for most of the book. Like my heart was constantly racing, and it was just like, what's gonna happen? I love the scenery of the book. It was just so atmospheric, and the audiobook was amazing. I do have a vlog for this book, but I didn't really get to talk about the book as much as I wanted to because I was still trying to like sift through really my emotions that I had for it. But this is definitely a 5-star read, and it was definitely one of my favorite books, and I can't believe I almost forgot to add it to this video. Oh my gosh, it was just such a hectic year. I read so many amazing books, and the thumbnail would be some of the books that didn't make it to my top 7, I guess, but were pretty good, like The Fifth Season, The Vanishing Half, Such a Fun Age, How to Walk Away, When We Collided. There was just so many books that I loved this year. So the last book the series that was my favorite in 2020 was A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Bridget Kemmer. I believe it's a part of the Curse Breaker series, and it follows a prince named Prince Ren who turns into a beast after an enchantress placed a spell on him or something like that, and he needs to fall in love to break the curse, but he can't seem to find a girl to fall in love with him. So one of his guards goes to Washington, D.C., where the guard snatches Harper, and Harper is taken back into this magical realm to help Prince Ren break the curse. And Harper, her mother's dying, her brother's in this gang or something like that, and she has cerebral palsy, so there's representation for that. And I just really enjoyed this book. I loved the love story aspect of the book. I loved how cozy, like cabin warmth it was in the book. It was just such a cute read now that I'm thinking back to it, because I did read this earlier in the year. I read the first 2 books. I believe the third comes out this year. Can't remember the name, but I am excited. I will be picking it up. The first book really focuses on Prince Ren, and then the second book focuses on his guard. And I loved both books so much. They were both 5-star reads for me. I'll be wrapping up this video. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found some new recommendations that you might want to read, or just books that might sound cool to you. And Happy New Year!